For 6 weeks, the officers of the 132nd Infantry Regiment had one running joke: Second Lieutenant John George and his toy. While they cleaned their standard-issue military garans, George was meticulously caring for a Winchester Model 70 sporting rifle, a bolt-action, 5-round civilian weapon he had bought with 2 years of saved National Guard pay and had shipped to the front lines via military mail. The regimental armorer asked if he intended to hunt deer or Germans. His captain explicitly ordered him to leave the sporting rifle in his tent and carry a real weapon. 0 confirmed kills, 0 combat experience. Just an Illinois state champion marksman with a scope nobody trusted. But on January 22, 1943, west of Point Cruz on Guadalcanal, the laughter stopped. Because in the previous 72 hours, 14 Americans had been executed by a phantom menace, and John George's toy was the only thing that could save them. This is the story of the most humiliating reality check in military history. The groves of Point Cruz were a death trap. Japanese forces had retreated from Henderson Field, but not all of them left. A unit of elite Japanese snipers, armed with scoped Arisaka Type 98s, had embedded themselves deep into the massive 90-foot banyan trees. They knew the jungle. They knew how to disappear into the shadows, and they were systematic. On January 19th, a sniper killed a corporal filling canteens at a creek. The next day, 2 men from L Company were executed during a patrol. On January 21st, 3 more died. One of them shot from a tree the patrol had already walked past twice. Malaria was no longer the battalion's biggest worry. The battalion commander was desperate. He summoned George that night with a simple question: "Can that mail-order rifle of yours actually hit anything?" George knew the physics, not the bureaucracy. Illinois state champion at 1,000 yards, 6-inch groups at 600 yards, and with his Lyman Alaskan scope, he could put 5 rounds inside a 4-inch circle at 300 yards. The commander gave him until morning to prove it. George spent the night cleaning the grease off his Winchester, checking the scope mounts, and loading 5 rounds of hunting ammunition he'd packed in Tennessee. He didn't want military ball ammo. He wanted the stopping power of civilian ammunition. Dawn, January 22nd, Point Cruz. George moved alone into the ruins of a Japanese bunker. No spotter, no radio man, just his rifle, a canteen, and 60 rounds of ammunition. He didn't focus on the noise of the jungle, the birds, or the distant artillery. He focused on movement. The Lyman Alaskan had only 2.5 power magnification. Not much, but enough to see what the naked eye missed. For hours, nothing. Then, at 9:17 a.m., a branch shifted. There was no wind. It was just a small, heavy movement. 87 feet up in a banyan tree, 240 yards away. Through the scope, George saw the shape of a man in dark clothing, nestled in a fork of the branches, waiting to execute the next supply patrol. George adjusted his scope, controlled his breathing, and felt the glass-smooth trigger. He squeezed. The Winchester kicked. 240 yards away, the Japanese sniper jerked and tumbled 90 feet, hitting the jungle floor. George immediately worked the bolt, chambering another round. He knew Japanese snipers worked in pairs. At 9:43, he found the second. 60 yards north of the first, sliding down a trunk in a panic, position compromised. George led the movement and fired again. 2 shots, 2 kills. In less than an hour, George had done more damage to the sniper nest than the entire battalion had done in days. But the duel had just begun. The Japanese snipers were learning. After 5 kills, the Japanese stopped moving during the daylight and began hunting the hunter. By dawn on January 23rd, the dynamic had changed. George was no longer shooting targets, he was dueling for his life. At 9:12 a.m., he scored his 6th kill, but 45 minutes later, Japanese mortars began saturating his position. George had to grab his rifle and sprint from the bunker, diving into a shell crater just as explosions obliterated his firing position. He was now hunting from fallen trees and machine gun nests. By the end of day 2, his total was 8 confirmed kills with just 12 rounds fired. January 24th was the masterpiece. George knew only 3 snipers were left, the best, the smartest, the most dangerous survivors. And they knew what he looked like. At 8:17 a.m., George found sniper number 9. The soldier was sitting low in a palm tree, only 40 feet up. A natural hide invisible from the ground. But George was elevated on rocks, giving him a view down into the fronds. George aimed, then stopped. Something was wrong. The position was too easy, too obvious. A survivor doesn't make elementary mistakes unless it's bait. He lowered the rifle and glassed the area for 11 minutes. Then, at 8:28, he found the real threat. A banyan tree 80 yards northwest, 91 feet up, positioned to destroy anyone who took the bait in the palm tree. George decided to use the bait against them. He aimed at the decoy and fired. As predicted, the real sniper reacted, turning to locate the sound. That movement was all George needed. He swung the rifle toward the banyan tree and fired before the sniper could complete his turn. 2 shots, 2 kills. Numbers 9 and 10 were down. The final duel, number 11, was the closest. At 9:47, George realized his mistake. The final sniper wasn't in the trees. He was on the ground, crawling through the ferns toward George's position. George was trapped in a water-filled shell crater. He waited, motionless, as the sniper crawled to within 25 yards of his hiding spot, but facing the wrong direction, focused on George's last position. George could have taken the easy shot, but again, he hesitated. This survivor wouldn't just sit in the open. It had to be another trap. And he was right. At 10:06, George spotted the 11th Soldiers Support Team, a Japanese soldier waiting to ambush the ambusher. But this time, George used patience. He submerged himself in the muddy water, keeping only his eyes and his muzzle above the surface. He waited for them to give up and move east. When they did, he rose silently from the water, mud dripping from his uniform, shouldered his rifle, and killed them both. 11 shots, 11 Japanese snipers dead in 4 days. The grove was clear. John George went on to create a sniper section, training 40 men with confiscated Marine rifles. His methods worked so well they were used again in the Burma campaign as part of Merrill's Marauders. George survived the war, became a State Department consultant, and wrote the definitive technical classic on jungle warfare, Shots Fired in Anger. He never used his Winchester in combat again, and the rifle now sits quietly in a museum in Virginia. Most visitors walk past it without stopping. It looks like just another hunting rifle. But it's the rifle that proved that when specialized skill meets unwavering courage, a mail-order toy can humiliate elite military training and change the course of a battle. If this story of individual heroism moved you, do us a favor and hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube that forgotten history like this needs to be seen. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment right now to let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing our community stretching across the globe. Thanks for watching, and thank you for helping us make sure men like John George are never forgotten.